Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and you may notice that there's a slight change in the setting. I needed to use a different space for a while, so I will be. Okay, so I was unable to get into the Call of Duty beta for some reason, despite the fact I have pre-ordered the game. I would have loved to play that and talk about that, but I haven't gotten the chance to, obviously. Hopefully there will be an open beta that I'll be able to jump into. So instead, I am doing a late review of Far Cry 3, the Classic Edition. Now, if you don't know what that is basically just an HD re-release of Far Cry 3. So, let's jump into it. The story is you play as Jason Brody, and you basically are vacationing with a bunch of your friends. You're going and doing crazy adventurous stuff, and while doing said crazy adventurous stuff, you and your friends get kidnapped by a bunch of pirates. Specifically, you are kidnapped by a man named Voss, and if you don't know who Voss is, that is a tragedy because he is honestly one of the best villains, and he is the villain that kicked off the insanity phase of the Far Cry games. If you've played any of the Far Cry games, you're probably well aware that they have this thing with their villains all being some variety of insanity. And very over-the-top and unique and interesting characters. I mean, I personally didn't necessarily feel that way about all of the villains in Far Cry 5, but 4 definitely, yes. And Primal, oh man, I forgot about Primal. Primal, you know, the villains weren't that interesting. Primal was a game that was there, it was Far Cry fulfilling and playable. That being said, you and your brother escape, he dies. No spoilers, because, well, that's like the first 5 minutes of actual gameplay. After that, you go on a quest to get your friends back. You end up getting wrapped up in something much larger than you ever expected to be involved in, and it's actually a really great story. It's really interesting to see Jason Brody's character change. Most games, you go in, you are Billy Badass, or they say you're not, and you really are. This time, he's not. You get to see him grow into this person that he becomes throughout the game. And I think that's really cool and unique, and I really liked watching that growth. As for the audio, I'm kind of split on because the voiceover work is well done and the sound effects sound good. I really love the gun sound effects. The first time I fired a gun in this game, oh my god, it was just boom! It was loud, it was concussive, it was fantastic. It's the way I want a gun to sound in pretty much all games. The animals, the sound effects of the jungle, all of those are well done. There is, however, one major problem. When it comes to your enemies, when it comes to the animals you're hunting, when it just comes to animals in general, vehicles, etc., it's really hard to determine where they are. It's like the sound is just cranked up to 11 unless you're like 200 meters away from any of those things. Not only that, it's horrible directional audio, because they could be 100 yards away. I'm exaggerating, they're really never that far away. But they could be quite far away and sound like they're right next to you. They sound like they're right fucking here or here, you can't tell. It's problematic, especially when you're trying to sneak around, especially when you're hunting an animal or being hunted by like a tiger or a bear or something, because you can't tell where it is. When you're trying to sneak around, it's hard to determine where your enemies are because it just sounds like they're right next to you at all times. Even if they're not, even if they're a good like 20 meters away, it does sound like they're right next to you. So it's problematic. So it kind of tears me because the sound effects sound good, but the sound design of where things are in the world and volume control on it is just shit. As for the gameplay, it's open world. We saw that in Far Cry 2. I think Far Cry 3 did it much better. There's a lot of tasks. There's a lot of RPG elements. I will say that the tasks, it's nice because there's not too many, but they could use a little bit more variety. I think they're closer to that balance of good variety and not being repetitive, but also not being overwhelming. Because that can be a problem when that just seems way too overwhelming. This is the Far Cry that introduced the radio towers, and I mean, they make a joke about it in a later game, understandably so, because you find yourself climbing a lot of radio towers. colors. It's how you reveal the map, which is also a good sized map, but not a too large map. You'll also have a lot of outposts to clear. I actually spent a good amount of time doing that. The missions themselves, they can be challenging, and there's a good variety, especially in the missions, the core missions. There's a good variety. I like that in this Far Cry, you can really choose stealth or just go balls to the wall action. I like that, but I will say, obviously, due to the audio design, stealth is not as easy as I would like it to be. It doesn't work as well as I would like it to. I'll also say, because this was actually really frustrating for me, I mean, it's just kind of me bitching about an awesome feature that comes later in later Far Cries, but the auto drive feature made life so much easier in the later games, and it is not present in this game. So you actually have to drive places, which I know it's silly and whiny, but it's a feature that I've gotten used to and enjoy, and I now miss. When it comes to the controls, I like the controls. They work very well, but I do feel like the aiming, I had to tune it down a little bit because it felt a bit too jerky. And like I've said before, I generally judge this on how the initial controls are. I don't like to have to modify the controls apart from inverting. I like to be able to just pick up a game, invert the controls, and go. I don't like to have to play around with the sliders too much. Sadly, I definitely had to here because, well, like I said, it's a bit jerky. But with the controls overall, I didn't have any problems with them not being responsive enough. I never ran into that. So lastly, the graphics. Man, going back, the graphics are bad. I wish they had gone back and actually redone the graphics so that it would look good, look much better. You can definitely see the age in this game. It really is just a straight up HD re-release. I guess the graphics aren't terrible, but I remember them being better, and I mean, we can do so much better, and we can go back and make games look better. We've seen it before, so I just wish they had done that with Far Cry 3. I will say, I like the character design. I like the art style. I like the color palette because it's actually a fairly bright game, and I like that. They very easily could have done what they did in Far Cry 2, where everything was the muted tones and everything was a shade of brown, basically. So I like that Far Cry 3 was very colorful. Okay, so that being said, the game is not like crazy expensive, but I would wait till it's on sale. I don't have a problem recommending playing it again because, well, it's still a great game in a lot of ways. There are some things that have not aged amazingly with it, though. So yeah, I'd recommend it, but I'd recommend it when it's about 10 to 15 bucks. Okay, so in the comments below, why don't you tell me if you're kind of tired of games being always brown and gray. And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button, and if you like what I'm doing in general, share or subscribe. Have a good one.